broker at Kelso Homes Real Estate, and I am a downsizing specialist and the creator of this series. So wonderful that the weather cooperated a little bit more today than it did last month, and that we have you all here safely. So before we get started, just a couple announcements. So you all have the note-taking sheet, which has everyone's information, all the bios on our wonderful speakers today. The yellow sheet, so the note-taking sheet you get to keep. If you've never got a notebook, we do have the notebooks for sale for $5 now for everybody who's new that doesn't have them. A lot of our regular attendees find that as the perfect way to just keep everything organized and in one place. And then for all of your questions, we know that when we cover these topics, we are only able to scratch the surface of the information and the questions that you might have after some of these presentations. So that yellow sheet is designed for you to request more information on any subject or of any of the speakers that we have. So by all means, please give us your feedback. Let us know who you have more questions from, and we will reach out to you to make sure that you get the answers that you need. One other quick thing. Our fun sponsor bingo, I know you guys have been having a great time getting to know all of our educational partners around the room. When we did the first round of this, we asked you to turn them back into us at the end of the day or at the end of the presentation because that was easier. We found that was a little chaotic for my wonderful volunteers. And so please keep these with you and just turn them in when it is completed. And as soon as I have 25 completed entries, or every 3 months, we will do the $100 drawing. So likely there will be, a drawing probably next month, and then again at the end. So yeah, that is the main stuff. So today we are talking about money. All right, this can be a really, really taboo subject sometimes. So both my husband and I grew up in really, really modest families. He is from Gaylord, and he spent the first 7 years of his life in a trailer on his parents' property that his parents had purchased. And I grew up here in Grand Rapids and was part of the group that got free hot lunches, government cheese, and spent many years paying off college loans to get my degree. And now I don't say that as a bad thing, because in all honesty, it made me part of who I am today. We were both fortunate to have parents that absolutely, we didn't have a lot, we had everything that we needed, and certainly never had to truly go without. And it helped me build a work ethic, and that made a big difference even up until today. And the reason that I share that is because I'm guessing that there are many of you in today's audience, when you hear some of the numbers that people throw out there in regards to senior living and assisted living, and especially if you, God forbid, end up needing full-time nursing care, that can be a great expense. And I know that can often bring fear to people, and it is a scary subject at times. But what I want to approach it today in that sense that, in my mind, money is only as good as what it can provide for people. There's no benefit to money that doesn't get used in a positive way. And we've all heard stories of the celebrities who had millions and yet went bankrupt. I was gonna laugh at them. And yet these people who had very, very modest jobs, and somehow upon their passing, they're able to donate $1 million to their favorite charity. How does that happen? Well, it happens partially with planning and choices and how you live your life. So we're really going to talk about today from an aspect of empowerment. So no matter what financial resources that you have, there are likely different avenues that you can go down, and the best way to get the best result is going to be by making a plan, regardless of whether you're living on a modest income or living with a lot of resources. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go down the line and have each of our speakers introduce themselves, and then we're going to hop right into questions because we've got a lot of information to share today.
Hi, good morning. My name is Charles Howley. I'm with The Key, Private Duty and Home Care Assistance.
Good morning, I'm Sherry Hooper, and I'm with Summit Wealth Partners, and I'm the Senior Wealth Advisor there.
Good morning, my name is Curtis Cottle. I'm with Security Benefits Center. I'm a financial advisor and retirement planner, and actually I'm from Gaylord, Michigan as well.
Hi there, I'm Bob Calorie. I'm from Area Agency on Aging in Western Michigan. I coordinate our MMAP program, Michigan Medicare Medicaid Assistance Program.
All right, thank you guys. We have absolutely a wealth of information to share with you today. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start with Charles. So Charles, there are certainly many older adults who desire to remain in their homes as long as possible and really make that plan that they want to bring in the care that they need. So before we dive into the details of that, tell us a little bit just about your background and how you came to be in the home health care business.
Sure. I was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area, and I grew up in a caregiving family, so I was very aware of healthcare issues and concerns. I got a master's in speech pathology, so I spent a lot of time working with seniors, typically who had experienced a stroke or some other traumatic brain injury to help them recover some of their communication faculties. Recently, after dealing with some senior care issues with my mother, I found myself actually in being contacted by senior care agencies. And The Key actually recruited me to bring me on board. So I've been in senior care and peripheral senior care industries for quite some time.
Wonderful. Let's talk about the various options for home care that are out there and a general idea of what someone can realistically expect to pay at each level of various home care options. And then also, is any portion of that generally paid by insurance?
That's a great question. So home care or senior care or senior living, home care is often very, very specific to staying in your residence, right? So if you have a home and you'd like to stay in your home, but you need a little additional support. Maybe it's hard for you to get to and from places for transportation, meal prep, some chores around the house. As we get older, our faculties decline, and we need some assistance. So you can have someone come and help you out in your home, and spend as little as $500 a month. Senior daycare options would be where you're dropped off or you stay off-site for a period of time, and they will do kind of food prep for you there and activities, and that can be $1,500 a month. In an assisted living facility, so you leave your primary home, you go to a facility that will provide assistance where you live in their facility now, can start at $5,000 a month. There's often a lot of things included in that, but a lot of things aren't. So as you get into kind of skilled nursing facilities, so what we think is a nursing home, and it's typically with people who need more care, more physical assistance, and medically complicated, can be $10,000 plus a month. And if you want to stay at home and have full-time caregivers living in your home providing care and services, that can be in the 8,000 to 10,000 or more, depending on if it's couples care, if you have lost all mobility and you need someone to help transfer you all the time. But there's a lot of different options under a lot of different price ranges. And insurance is not going to cover any of these services unless you have long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance will often pay for a lot of these services that we talked about, which is amazing, outstanding. Medicare is not going to cover any of these costs. Medicaid can cover your assisted living facilities or nursing home, but in order to be eligible for that, you really have to be down to nothing. Unless there's ways to protect some of that income through financial planning and estate law. But Medicaid will provide those services, and regardless of how much you're due on your Social Security, if you are getting Medicaid-approved housing for care, you end up keeping about $60 of your Social Security every month. So it can cost you everything. Is the answer to that question.
Yeah, so that certainly can be very scary. But honestly, if someone is going between the thought of, gosh, I don't necessarily need to move, I can bring care into my house. One of the things that Charles and I discussed is how a caregiver can actually transition from helping someone in their home to helping them after they've transitioned into independent senior living, assisted living, or even memory care. So it's not always just where you either have home care or you live in a senior community. They can certainly work together to still, give someone the best care. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so one thing you need to consider while you're considering your aging, how are you going to age? Who's going to provide for your care? Where are you going to live? What's important to you? If socialization and transportation is something that's important to you, and you notice you're having difficulty or making excuses for not going out, or maybe not going shopping on a regular basis, you can have care come in. You can have a caregiver who can come in and help you with those things. And don't think of it as a loss of independence. It's an augmentation of your independence, because now you have someone who can help you live your best life. And you're not limited by any physical constraints. And this carries on to your independent living communities or assisted living. So assisted living will provide some support, but it's not going to be 24/7 one-on-one caregiver support. A lot of people think that assisted living is going to provide, someone's always going to be there for me and available. And there's some very good assisted living communities, but your common call time from when you ring an assistance bell to when a caregiver makes it into your room is about 15 minutes. So if you're having mobility issues or bladder control issues, and it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes for someone to get in and help you, they can actually downgrade your quality of care and say, well, you can't live here anymore, you're going to have to go to a skilled nursing facility. Well, and again, that's where having a caregiver support coming in and helping you with those things can keep you in assisted living communities longer without having to move to that next level of care. So home care and home support is a great way to keep you where you're at, wherever it may be, safer, longer. In transitioning from one location to another, having that caregiver who might have been with you for years at this point, helping with that transition, especially for individuals living with memory care issues, is tremendously beneficial to the health and well-being of those individuals.
Yeah, so just if the one thing that I want you to take away from that is that there are so many different options, and every person is going to be individual, but most definitely I think the idea of having a long-term caregiver that can assist you at whatever level you need and augment those additional things is really important. So while many of us work with seniors on a day-to-day basis as, quote-unquote, the experts, we are also sons and daughters helping our own parents. And can you walk us through your recent experience with your mom, and if that changed any of the previous beliefs that you had before that happened?
Yes, so my mother is 72. She's very active, socially active in her community. She liked line dancing. She was always quite a mover and a shaker. She was down in South Carolina. Well, July of this year, she was leaving her book club and lost her footing on a set of stairs and fell down a flight of stairs, concrete stairs, and sustained multiple brain injuries, some broken ribs. She had extensive stitches, and she lost consciousness. So she went from someone who was very active and capable to now someone who's hospitalized with a traumatic brain injury. So I went down to help provide care for her. And it's the dramatic changes. We can make a lot of well-intentioned plans of, oh, this is how everything's going to be when I age, but oftentimes what we see, the people I come into contact with, it's a dramatic change. So it's something that hadn't been planned for or accounted for, and certainly with me and my mother, that was exactly the thing. I should have known better. And we had some conversations about her desires for care and what was important to her. So when she was out of the hospital and back home, I was her primary caregiver. She had limited cognition and mobility, and her home where she was living was just not an option for her anymore. So I had to make some tough decisions. What do I do? What do we do with mom, right? And one of the things that she had said that was most important to her was her social network, right? So her friends in that community where she'd been for 20 to 25 years. So for her, that's a keystone to her well-being. So I was able to find an independent living community that was very close to where she currently lived. It would have been easier for me to bring her to Michigan, but it's not what's best for her, and it's not what she wanted. And thankfully, she communicated those desires to me, so we were able to make a placement for her. But she still does need support and assistance, and juggling that. Even being in the industry of senior care and dealing with this on a regular basis, I was still unprepared. And you should be having conversations with your loved ones, the people around you, just communicating those desires of what your plans and intentions are, because there may be situations where you will not be in a position to enforce those wills and desires. So that was really eye-opening to me. So I make sure I mention to anyone that I talk to on a regular basis, as I'm making all the phone calls dealing with my mother's health and expenses. If you don't have a plan, if you have loved ones that are aging and you don't have a plan for them, please start those conversations early.
Yeah, because 72 is young. I mean, that's the craziness when you go from, book club to the hospital in the blink of an eye when no one expected it. So we also talked about the concept of how hiring outside help or even assisting parents to transition to senior living when it makes sense really allows adult children to go back to their role of being a son or a daughter versus solely a caregiver. And I know that we've talked about that idea before. Did your experience with your mom, enforce this?
Yes, quite a bit. Being my mom's caregiver, it's quite a role reversal to be put in that position. But I was having to tell my mom to do things that weren't comfortable for her. Hey, we got to make sure you're walking on a regular basis, eat this food. She's forgetting to eat, and it was a parent relationship on my behalf. Now taking care of my mother, who wasn't capable of really taking care of herself. But it really limited me in the ways that I could be there for her emotionally, because there was so much physical stuff that was going on in maintaining the transition and working with her physically to keep her stable. I didn't have a chance to be a son to her, which after my father passed away, just didn't have a lot of family that's available to her. And caring for your loved ones oftentimes puts a tremendous strain on the caregiver, especially if it's a spouse or a close loved one. You're taking care of a parent. They get stressed out and they get burnout, and the caregivers can often end up getting sick themselves, especially if they are also seniors taking care of their spouse or loved one. Helping your loved one transition from a bed to maybe a chair or a wheelchair can be very physically taxing. Having to clean them if they have incontinence issues, it really removes that sense of intimacy that you have with your loved one, and now it's more like a patient instead of your wife or your husband. So it can remove from you a lot of those emotional connections if you're just the primary caregiver, because it can be a trudge of lovery, of, hey, this is out of love, but we see over years people get worn out. And then bringing in home care, whether it's as a respite, so you can have people come in and give you a break if you're the caregiver for days or weeks at a time, because you need to make sure that your caregivers are being taken care of too. So part of your plan is having a loved one look out for you and care for you. We should also consider how you are going to support that caregiver in your home.
Yeah, well said. And I really find that in a lot of different areas as we're helping our parents and trying to guide, parents, grandparents, whatever the case may be. Because sometimes those lines do blur between being a professional and helping, or being a son and a daughter. And those dynamics can be really, really challenging. And often, by hiring outside professionals in whatever category we're talking about, we can really go back to, caring for each other as family and not so much as caregivers. So thank you, Charles. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to Sherry, and Sherry has someone I've known now for years. She's done a wonderful job helping us navigate our own finances in our family, and it's just been a great resource. So I know that money does not buy happiness, but have certainly learned that it has the ability to take the stress out of certain important decisions simply by widening the options that are available. So can you tell us the very first steps that you take with a client to help establish a list of their financial priorities?
Yes, one of the things that I'd like to be able to do is really just hear your story. Because it's really personal, it's really unique to you, and I don't know what those priorities will be until I can just hear from each of you what those priorities might be. And that comes out in just, what is your background, and who are your children, and do you have any health issues? What types of assets do you have? What type of income do you need? And so as we're forming this, sometimes our whole first time together might just be in visiting and becoming friends. Because that's really where I'm gaining a lot of information and where I'm really understanding your behaviors and maybe where those behaviors come from. Because some of us were born in different generations. Some of us really cling to even what our parents used to say or still say. And some of those things are really important to us. We don't just forget our habits. We don't just forget how we were raised, and we don't forget those behaviors. So all of that is really important in establishing now what is it that we're really trying to accomplish. So when we're looking at those financial priorities, just to piggyback, one of the biggest things is really let's make sure that some of that estate planning is in place, and it's more about the patient advocate. I just think that is so important to really realize that as we're talking about some of these caregiving situations and things that may happen, we have to have an advocate. And a lot of times we assume that's our children, but I have so many clients that don't have children. And we get to these older ages, and all of a sudden we realize as we're putting together these documents that are so important that there's nobody to list. And that's what stops people from really doing the paperwork that's required. So really keep that in mind, that having a patient advocate or having a power of attorney, those are some of those priorities that I like to interject, because I realize in this situation even here, and I'm so sorry about your mom, I was bringing tears to my eyes, but accidents happen. sickness happens, but accidents can really throw us. And then we're spinning our wheels trying to catch up a little bit. So that is one of the areas that as we consider financial priorities, I think I would put near the top.
Perfect. Yeah, because, as we certainly emphasize the fact in this series that there are no right answers. It is all the choices that you're making as we age from our 50s, our 60s, our 70s, and our 80s are so very personal, based on your own goals and your own decisions. And, it's always about finding out your options and determining what's going to be the best course for you personally. So of course, I call this the GR Savvy Senior Learning Series, but we are already talking to our 18-year-old about how to start financial planning. Because, Mark and I have been married 30 years almost, and we look back and we laugh at boy, we really did some dumb things once upon a time, and if only we had known or felt differently in certain ways, we could have been much farther ahead, this and that. And so, of course, as parents, we try and spew all that at our kids and get them to do things better than we did, and maybe they listen to some of it. But is there a certain age or stage that where it really becomes critical to do this financial planning process and have a plan? Or can you jump in with someone at virtually any stage and simply adapt to that plan as their situation changes?
I always like to debunk that feeling or that old myth that says you can't have a financial advisor until you have money. I actually think in order to have money, you need a financial advisor. It really takes the time. Time is our biggest asset, and as soon as you can get started, the better off that you would be. And so I always like to let people know that the financial advisor is a wealth of information. You're not going there just to get money invested. You're going there for solutions and education and advice. And those are the things that I provide more often than anything else. So of course I want people to come in at any age, at any stage in your life, not necessarily just because you have something to invest at that time. Because by then we're really going backwards and saying, well, how can we best use this money? Instead of maybe having a plan and a relationship already available where we can just move forward now. Maybe this was a surprise. Maybe we're trying to build a retirement so that you can get to those years where you can finally be away from the workplace and do as you wish, and not necessarily, do as somebody else is wishing you to do all day long, those 8 hours a day. But I just want to share, one of my favorite clients is being able to meet with, I had an 18-year-old junior from Jenison High School. And he came in and he was interested. And he wanted to know how he could invest. Could he open an account? And he started with $80 a month coming out of his account every month. And he worked at Tommy's Car Wash. I'm thinking, he has more interest and more discipline than a lot of the clients that I have. So I would say some of those clients that are coming in, now he's not the first. I've had probably 2 high school students, maybe 3 since him. And I am so encouraged. I will sit with them for an hour and a half if they want, and I will give them the information they're looking for. But it's so important that if we don't start letting them know that we need to start planning today, right? Because there's solutions for everybody. At every phase, at every age, there is a solution for what we're trying to accomplish. And what you may not have had as a Roth years ago in your early years, they do have that today. And even if they can't max it out, $80, $40, $25 is really something that can turn into a very big something in a matter of 10, 15, 20 years even. So putting the discipline into place, having interest, talking about it with your grandkids. As I look in the room, we might have grandkids that just want to have some interest. And I'm getting more information that there's financial classes coming along in the high schools now. My son took I forgot what they called it. He's at Grand Rapids Christian, and they had a financial savvy, let's call it. Why not? And so it was just one semester, and when he took it, I was so excited. I was like, you want to do homework? And then, of course, he didn't really involve me as much, but at the end of project, he let me help. And I kept going, what did you get graded? I mean, what did you get? He never actually told me. He doesn't love it as much as I do. But what I loved is they had broken down this class into 16 segments. And they had it all the way from beginning knowledge of saving, checking, money market, I don't know about checkbook, debit cards probably, right? They went through the whole gamut of what is the economy, what is the market, assets, they had to pick a stock, those types of things. Well, I am thrilled to say that that class is now mandatory. So in just 1 year of it being an elective, now it's already mandatory. So these kids are getting more information, and that is important. But I would say that it's important for all of us to just interject those conversations with our grandkids, our nieces, nephews, our neighbors, as we build those relationships, because really time is the biggest asset, and that's what they need is to get started sooner than later. So everybody can have a financial advisor.
And one thing that just came to mind as you're saying that, so many things have changed in recent years with everything becoming digitized, that it's a whole new world. And for those of you who may be, old school and still do everything on paper, just the option to have a professional who is more, more savvy with the online tools and the digital tools can make a world of difference. Because I just this week had the conversation with my 22-year-old daughter who's getting married, who's like, Mom, why do I need a checkbook? I'm never going to use a checkbook. And I'm like, trust me, you still need one, even if you do Venmo 90% of the time. I said, as you, there's going to be businesses and things that you do that you still need a checkbook. But how different is that? I mean, could we have guessed 20 years ago that there would be a time when people would think that they never needed a checkbook? So just a little odd.
Well, Laura, really quick too, it does, even when I'm setting up the investment accounts, they still want your bank information, and the best resource is still that check. I still ask for voided checks with almost each application. I can't do PayPal yet. I mean, maybe it's coming up, but the checkbook is important. One thing I want to go back and reiterate too, when we're talking about any age for a financial advisor, is really understanding that in every phase of our life, whether you're in your 20s, I kind of wrote down, in your 20s, you might be just starting your first job. And a financial advisor can really help you understand your benefits and using them to the best of your ability. Because when you start a brand new 401k or 403b, you don't know what funds to choose. You may not even understand the company's match and getting the maximum match, right? So at your 20s, you might even be needing a financial advisor to help you navigate those areas. In your 30s, you might be married and starting to have kids, and you want to start saving for education for them. You might want to start getting into a new home. Maybe you're looking for that, or you're married, because everybody's kind of doing things a little bit later today. In your 40s, I hope you're still married, but a lot of times we see divorces occurring already, which is sad, but that divides everything. Now we have to start over. Or you're maybe married and having more kids, and you're upsizing. You get into a bigger house. Maybe you have more debt, and we have to get back to some of those discipline areas. When you're 50, I'd like to think that this is the area where you're finally able to invest for yourself more, right? Because we're past all those other expenses, and the kids are a little bit older. We can really...
And we're paying for weddings in college, so...
Yeah, okay, so 60, we're really going to start investing for ourselves. Anyway, my point was, there is always a good time to have a financial advisor.
Amen, sister. So the subject of paying for senior living, like I talked about in the introduction, can be a huge concern for many older adults. So can you give us some estimates of what individuals and couples can expect to pay a month for various senior living, and an average amount of years that you counsel your clients to plan on for those amounts?
Yeah, I wanted to be able to share a couple of statistics with you. There's surveys all the time, so I wanted to kind of pull some of the most recent surveys that I could. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is the inflation that we've experienced recently has been really challenging. And I realize probably the majority of you in this room are on fixed income. The fixed income means it doesn't change, but the inflation means all your expenses has, right? And that has been really tough. So when we look at the healthcare, since 2000, I wanted to kind of look over the last 20 years. Since 2000, healthcare has gone up 110%. That is really hard to combat. Now, when you look at consumer goods, they've gone up quite a bit too, but only 71%. I know. I mean, it is 20 years, but in contrast, we're really trying to talk about the healthcare and the long-term care. So that has gone up more exorbitant than just your average expenses, right? So when we're looking at long-term care, and there are long-term care solutions, and again, there are solutions for most things, right? It's going to be particular to you and what we might be able to do, but in reality, some more statistics that I find very interesting for long-term care is that men, they say, now this is coming from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, there's a 70% chance that today's 65-year-olds will need long-term care at some point. Okay, so they're already kind of putting us all in these groups based on age and what's going to happen in our future. The men will stay there for 2.2 years on average, is what I'm getting out of this particular study. Women, you will stay there on average 3.7 years. The reason that women always have a little bit more longevity is because we have more longevity, right? We tend to live a little bit longer, so our stay in these facilities are going to be a little bit longer. One thing though that I have a hard time with is, even listening to Charles when we're talking is, it's not necessarily the physical that keeps us in these facilities, not in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, but from so many conversations that I've had, it's the dementia and it's the Alzheimer's. And I have a hard time believing that 2.2 or 3.7 is all that we would stay when we're physically fit and yet our mind is challenged. So take those statistics, with a grain of salt. They are there, but I also have seen those statistics get blown up a little bit because we do have some of those issues with memory. So one of the last statistics here is 20% of all retirees will need some form of long-term care, however, for 5 years. So for more than 5 years. So we have to, again, plan for what that might look like. Now, when I put this information together, again, like I said, part of my job is education, and I love doing that. I will go out and put a whole presentation together on some of this retirement, income, Social Security planning, and it goes right into this long-term care. We have to plan for that. We have to understand the expenses. We know what's in front of us. Or, a lot of us do the hopium plan and hope that it's not me. And that tends to be the case when they see the long-term care coverage, the long-term care insurance premium. It's like, I think I'm going to go back to hopium, right? Because it's a huge part of our budget, and we're already on a fixed budget, or fixed income to go with what we hope would be more of a fixed budget. But again, my numbers, when I was looking with what I shared even through last year, through some of the different webinars or seminars that I've done, is right on with what Charles said. With full-time home health aid could be about $5,200 a month. Assisted living could be on average $4,500 a month. And a private room and skilled nursing can be $9,000 a month. So it can be real exorbitant. Now, it's interesting, it sounds like some of this long-term care is getting to be talked about in legislation. Apparently they went before Congress just last week based on an article I received. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is this gal, see if I can find it now quickly, but this gal had put her husband in a facility that was supposed to be fairly reasonable. But after all of the expenses, she had said about $7,000. After all of the expenses, it was more like $13,000, nearly $14,000 a month. And that was without long-term care help, right? Or long-term care insurance help. So, and those are some of the real life. Now that's not in Michigan, that was I believe out of Virginia that she had mentioned that. But some of the legislation as it's going before Congress is really just trying to say, hey, this is something that was just amazing to me, is to think that North Dakota has a population of 800,000, and yet when we look at those that are in a nursing home today, we are already at, it says 818,800 residents in 30,000 assisted living facilities across the United States. So we have as many people that live in North Dakota in facilities across the United States. When you put that in context, it's like, holy cow, there's definitely a great need, and there's more and more facilities all the time. But that means there's almost 500,000 workers, right, that have to be able to be in these facilities to help the care, provide the care that we have. So it's interesting to me that we have to be able to at least have those conversations, figure out the priorities. Are we going to go with hopium? Are we going to choose a new solution? And just ultimately be prepared for the costs that are in front of us.
And one of the most, the biggest things that I try and just impress upon people is the goal is to never need full-time nursing care. I mean, hopefully by doing some of these other proactive things that we talk about, and of course there are certainly things that we have zero control over in our health, and I understand that. But oftentimes, the transition to a higher level of care comes from a fall or something that could have potentially been avoided with some prior planning, some additional help, things like that. And so the more that, you can be proactive in the different areas to, keep yourselves healthy at all costs, because it's really, for so many reasons, and financial being a huge part of that. So I know that you work with, all clients, both married and single, but you've been really particularly passionate about working with women, and especially single women, and helping them better understand their financial future through your Women in Wealth program. So can you talk a little bit about why it is especially critical for single people to find an advisor they trust and build a personal plan?
Yeah, this is my favorite subject. I love being able to work with women, because we find that once we get to the retirement age already, we start to encompass what does that fixed income look like, where do those income sources come from, and often we get dependent on maybe our pensions, our Social Security, and all of a sudden one of us passes away, and in most cases, not every case, the man has passed away, and it leaves women with lesser income. Because our pension choices might not have been 100% survivor, maybe they were 50%, maybe that pension didn't get passed on at all. Or now we're down to Social Security because we only get to keep one. And so often it leaves women in a poverty situation, certainly in a declining income situation, and it's not one that was really thought about or talked about. And were there other assets that could have been invested and set aside, or are there assets that we can now turn on to help support that missing income that may have come from that pension or from that Social Security? So there are a lot of situations where I'm finding the statistics with women not really stepping up to the plate and wanting to be involved in finance because we're full. We have done everything else, to washing sheets and the laundry and the dishes and the meal planning and the groceries and watching the kids, watching the grandkids, right? I can go on. And if we can get a little moment to ourselves just to have a little hobby, it feels good. But finance, he'll do it, right? He'll do it. That's his job. Because I'm already full and I'm already multitasking in so many other areas. And I don't find that finance is just in our wheelhouse. I have maybe 1 out of every 10 women that go, I love it. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad that you love it. Tell me what you need from me, because I'm going to go down that path. But most of the time, the clients will come and I'm only dealing with the gentleman. I'm like, where's your wife? Oh, she had an exercise class. Oh, but this was so important. I really want to share. And it's really important to plan together, of course, because I don't think that any husband means to leave their spouse in a poverty situation or with reduced income or left with a lot of debt. Most of the time, it's just not that we just didn't communicate, we didn't talk about it. So because we live longer, ladies, we have a lot more that we have to do on our own. And so having conversations about how do we take care of our house, and how do we take care of our car, and what do you want me to do with your tools? And some of these things are, all of a sudden we're overwhelmed because we're left with these new responsibilities that we have never experienced or done before. And so we have to be able to consider what those things look like. But in that longevity, we also could have more healthcare issues that we've been talking about. If you live longer, we want to be able to live them with quality of life, but that's not always the case. So we also have to plan for a little bit more healthcare needs, or have now, maybe because we cared for our husband, who's going to care for us? And so we have to kind of think about those things a little bit more so too. And so I love to be able to share with women, there are some true statistics in front of us. There are some true things that are going to happen because we live longer. But if we can be prepared for them, if we can talk about them, if we can share. Now I realize a lot of you in this room already retired, already in the situation, but as I mentioned, I only get to tell this to one person at a time. So I have this in the back of the room that just talks about some of these statistics, and I would love for you guys to talk with your daughters and your nieces and your neighbors and share the idea that women do have to plan a little bit differently, or just to have a little bit more education and awareness. But I would appreciate your help in getting that out there, because we can fix this. It doesn't have to be these dire statistics. They can start to be real positive statistics if we just plan ahead.
And you host your Women in Wealth once a month?
I do Women in Wealth. I do love to have, it's called Women in Wealth Cocktails, third Thursday of the month. And we get together, we're following the alphabet, which makes it kind of fun. So the venue is selected by the alphabet. And this month is the letter letter L, and it's Lacari's. And so we get to have different environments, different cuisine, different desserts. I know that there are people in the room that love their desserts more than maybe their meal themselves. But we just get together, and during that time I can share more education. And it's an environment that's just women, so we never have to feel intimidated about asking a wrong question or being in front of men that are like, I told you that already, right? So it's a matter of being able to have fun and build relationships and network and just enjoy the environment. And there's all ages. So you ladies come on out, or grab my card and get on my email list, and I'd love to see all of you.
I've gone as many times as I can for the last few years, and it's just a ball and so fun to, 80% social and 20% just continuing to learn, which, as Sherry said, is so, so important. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on to Curtis so that we can get on to the Social Security planning. So, Curtis, with you and your company, Security Benefit Center, they wear quite a few hats, and all of those things help both individuals and families maximize their wealth security and make a proactive plan. So, once again, that word proactive. So can you start by telling us more on how you strategically help people plan for a time when Social Security becomes part of their monthly income?
Yeah, we get a lot of questions from our clients, and you might share some of these same feelings and emotions. Like, is Social Security going to be there for me? Am I going to have enough money in my retirement to last the way that I want to live? Do I have enough resources? And what if I told you that you can have more in your retirement without going to get another job, or without going to work after you've retired? You can get it in your exact current situation just by how you claim Social Security and how you run your retirement income. And the two biggest factors in that we see is how do you claim Social Security, and Social Security has just a whole different way of how it interacts with how you pay taxes and how your taxable situation is. So taxes and Social Security are the two biggest ways you can create more resources right now in your retirement without having to go get another job and do more work. And so what we do is we have a Social Security report that shows you, it takes all of the blurry confusion of how to claim Social Security out of it, and it gives you your top 3 ways how to claim Social Security that are best from you. From all the thousands of options, you can see what are your best 3, and you get very good clarity on how to maximize, get the most benefits out of your Social Security plan.
Thank goodness, because that's super, super, super confusing. So in terms of, what are some of the most important questions that you would ask clients that would help them to determine when they would start wanting to actually claim those benefits?
Yeah, that's a difficult question for a lot of people, so I'm glad you asked. The biggest thing is, and this is where it can get a little bit worrisome as far as like, do I make the right or wrong decision? Because the first thing we ask is, what are your goals for Social Security? Are you trying to get to a point where the Social Security income is just enough to meet your needs? Or are you trying to get the most total dollars out of the Social Security program? And those two goals are exactly conflicting on how you would claim Social Security. So that's why you hear so many conflicting things about Social Security. What's the right way? What's the wrong way to claim Social Security? What could be exactly right for somebody else could be completely wrong for the other person, depending on if your goals are different, right? So we don't want to have somebody say, oh, I heard my friend, or I heard through the grapevine that this is the best way to claim Social Security, when it could be the exact wrong path for what you're trying to accomplish in your retirement. And that's one of the biggest things we touch on quite a bit, and that's why we run this Social Security report. It almost is like Social Security, and I mentioned taxes earlier, they're both government divisions, right? And so when we're looking to get information from the government, has anybody else had a hard time finding good information from the government? Right, it's almost like they're keeping it a secret, right? They're keeping the information a secret. And so what we like to do is we like to share the secrets about how to claim more money in Social Security, how to do things the right way, and how to share the secrets on how to get more money in your pocket and pay less taxes.
Pay less taxes, you're speaking my language, I like that. So let's talk about those who really enjoy their jobs, or even that thought of want to do an encore career, that they, something that they enjoy more later in life. Does income affect what you might receive in benefits, and how does continuing to work or not work feed into the decision of when to claim Social Security?
Yeah, that's a technical question, because if you decide to work and draw Social Security early, they do limit how much money you will get in your benefit based on how much money that you earn. So basically, if you're drawing Social Security before your full retirement age, for a lot of people in this room, it's either before 67 or before 66 years old, then you can earn up to $22,320 per year, and it won't affect your Social Security benefit. So if you're working and you're making that much money or less, it doesn't affect you at all. If you're making more than that, they start to deduct from your Social Security benefit. So if every dollar you earn above that amount, they subtract half of that from your Social Security. So for easy math, if you earn $10,000 more than that, $5,000 will be deducted from your Social Security income benefit. Now, some people can get creative and say, oh, my job will let me work less hours and work part-time, and it might make sense to keep the same job, but adjust how you do the job and how much you work. So some people can kind of squeeze it in that way. If you have not claimed Social Security and you're thinking about it, and you're not quite full retirement age, sometimes if you just don't want to mess with what they call the annual earnings test, this deduction from your Social Security income, sometimes the best thing is just to not claim Social Security until you're full retirement age. Most people don't need Social Security retirement age or Social Security income while they're working, right? So if you don't need it while you're working, you might as well let your Social Security benefit grow, and then you'll actually get a higher amount later. And what I mentioned earlier is Social Security is actually one of the most tax favorable incomes. You pay the least amount of taxes on Social Security than most of your other income streams in retirement. Most people have, if you have working wages or you're taking money out of your IRA or 401k, 100% of that income is taxable. It's all taxable as income. Social Security is not that way. Usually you're paying 50 or 30% taxes on your Social Security. So you're getting 50 to 70% tax-free compared to an IRA income or working wages. So it's very, very tax favorable. So delaying that while you don't need that could mean more Social Security income and more income because you're paying less taxes on top of that.
There's a lot to digest there. So, well, Social Security planning might be fairly simple for healthy couples who are simply deciding how to maximize their benefits. I realize that many people have much more complicated complicated situations. So what can you tell us about things like spousal benefits for those who have been divorced or widowed, and how can people in those situations find out what benefits they would be entitled to, especially if they were not the primary household earner?
Yes, this is a big, big deal. And Sherry touched on this a little bit, with women, and when they lose a spouse, it's a whole different situation. She mentioned that you lose a Social Security in the household, and usually your budget is wrapped around both Social Security. So I mentioned that we share a lot of secrets about how to maximize your Social Security benefit. This is a huge one I'm going to share with you here, and it would be extremely good if you shared this with anybody who it might apply to. So whether you're married, or even if you're currently divorced, but you were married for at least 10 years before you got divorced, you're qualified for something called a widow's benefit. And this is an unbelievable secret about Social Security that a lot of people don't know, because you have two things that you can't do in any other situation. One, you can claim earlier than 62, right? So you can get the Social Security benefit. You don't have to be in disability or anything. Anybody can qualify for early withdrawal at 60 years old instead of 62. So you get 2 years early, you can start taking. And then, what a lot of people don't realize is you can choose between which income. You can take your own income, or you can take your deceased spouse income as a survivor's benefit. But what a lot of people don't realize is whichever one you choose, it could be the right answer to choose either one. The other benefit that you don't choose doesn't go away. Once you start taking income, the other benefit continues to grow, and you can later switch to that higher benefit. So you can draw a benefit as early as 60 years old, you can draw all the way till 70, and then you can switch at 70 to maybe something that looks like twice your Social Security income. So you have a 100% increase potentially on your Social Security income by using this surviving spouse benefit. And this is so valuable because, like Sherry mentioned, it's a difficult situation when your budget is wrapped around two incomes, right? So we want to do everything we can to protect the surviving spouse, protect yourself for if you're widowed. And this works for both men and women. Whoever is the widowed one can claim one sooner and grow the other one and get a higher income later. And so it's a really good situation. And a lot of people who have gone through divorces, if you've been married for 10 years or longer before the divorce to any one of your spouses in the past, you can actually use those spousal claiming options just the exact same as if you were currently married. So you don't have to worry, oh, I'm divorced, am I missing out on anything? Or do I not qualify for things I used to qualify for? If you were married for 10 years, you get the same treatment as if you were currently married from a benefit standpoint. You get all the benefits that are owed to you. And if it makes more sense to coordinate off of your ex-spouse, it's the same as if you were coordinating, if somebody got to coordinate off of their current spouse. The only thing is you just have to be unmarried at the time you exercise those options, and then you'll have all those same choices.
Okay, so the question that keeps coming to mind now that people are living longer, I know my mom and her husband got married in their mid-80s. So if you have multiple divorces or multiple spouses that you were married to for 10 years apiece, do you just get to choose one of them, or do you end up with multiple benefits from various spouses?
Yes, good question. So the biggest key factor is, were you married to that ex-spouse for 10 years or longer? And also, so generally speaking, if you were married for 10 years or longer, or the spouse was deceased and it wasn't ending in divorce, you can never draw two benefits at the same time, right? So you can only draw one, but you will be able to choose and pick which benefit you want, so long as you're for a divorced spouse, you're unmarried at the time that you claim. But if you get married after 60, now you still have those options as well. So you can choose whichever one might be the best fit for you. However, you can't choose 2 or 3 or 4 all at the same time. Right? So
Darn it.
Yeah. So we haven't found a way to find a loophole in Social Security yet, even though we get a lot of requests for that.
All right, well, thank you. So I know that Social Security is a huge topic and that we've only been able to hit the tip of the iceberg on this. So can you talk a tiny bit about how people can learn more and some of the ways that you offer for people to specifically hear more about Social Security planning?
Absolutely, yes. So the first place you're going to want to go is ssa.gov. That's the Social Security website, and you are just set up an account. You register and set up an account. It's actually pretty simple to do. Some people get a little intimidated about setting up usernames and passwords, and I know it's pretty simple because we've done probably over 1,000 of these, helping people set up these accounts. So it actually is pretty quick. If you had set it up in the past and you can't remember your password or username, it's also pretty quick to recover those. We've probably done another 1,000 where we've recovered people's usernames and passwords, and we've got it down to where we can do it in less than 2 minutes. So it is a pretty simple process. One thing I want to let you know about is when you're setting up an account or recovering passwords, sometimes they'll ask you to put your Social Security number in there. And at first I thought it was funny because I had somebody say, well, I'm concerned, I don't want to put my Social Security, out there. And I was like, well, this is the place that made your Social Security number. But that is a valid concern. As I thought about it further, I was like, well, there's a lot of spam and scams out there. And Bob and I were just talking about this. Bob deals with this too in Area Agency on Aging. So sometimes it can look like you're in the right place, but maybe you're not in the right place. So if you do have concerns about that, it is not a bad idea to just have a son or a daughter or somebody that you trust knows those things there with you if you're concerned about those things. The easiest way you can do it, sometimes we search, Social Security, and then we click on a website, right? That's most of the time what we do. But that isn't the safest way to do it. The safest way is to type ssa.gov in the top of the address bar and go directly to the site, because some sites can look like the Social Security site when you click on the link, but you're going directly to the correct place if you type ssa.gov. So that's where you can see all your information. And then from there, that's what we use to run the reports. And we can show you exactly what the best way to claim, what we've shown to our clients, the top 3 ways to claim. All the confusion aside, there's thousands of ways to claim. Of course, there's confusion. But when you say, oh, these are my best 3, it makes it a whole lot easier to understand I'm getting the most of my Social Security in the Social Security report.
And then what are some of the seminars that your company offers through security benefits?
Yeah, we believe in education. That's why when we were asked to do this panel, it just fit right in stride with how we like to educate the public. So we do about 40 to 50 classes a year, and we do topics on how to maximize your Social Security benefit. We do topics on how to pay less taxes in retirement. We do topic on estate planning and talking about the documents that Sherry had mentioned of the estate planning and power of attorney medical directive. So we do estate planning. We do Medicare. A lot of people have questions about Medicare. So we do all these topics, and we're going to be introducing some new ones here. One of the ones we want to do, I mentioned a little bit about making sure you're in the right place. How to protect yourself from people who scam and spam and do all these things. We're going to do a whole education series on that. And then we're also going to be starting one on health and wellness. And we find that when you're healthy and you're well and you're taken care of, it affects all of the rest of the areas in your life. So you do better when you're in your retirement, when you have all these things taken care of.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you who want to find out more about their education programs, just stop by their table. So Bob, so nice to have you back as a speaker today. And I have heard him speak many, many times on the subject of Medicare and Medicaid, and I am still confused every single time. So, just saying. And this is what I do day in and day out, and I still can't keep it all straight. So, can you begin by telling us more about MMAP and how they help seniors and their families navigate this super complicated subject?
Yeah, sure. So MAP, we are MAP, the Michigan Medicare Medicaid Assistance Program. So what MAP stands for. We are the State of Michigan SHIP program, State Health Insurance Assistance Program. So every state in the country has a program like ours. We're a federally mandated program. And what we are is a community resource to answer Medicare questions and Medicaid questions for Medicare beneficiaries. Here in Michigan, we're our own statewide nonprofit volunteer organization. So we utilize volunteers to help answer all types of questions, Medicare related, and then also the Medicaid related to older adults specifically. So any question on Medicare, everybody from new to Medicare up to plan reviews each year, people want to appeal services, questions on fraud and abuse, billing questions, how do I read my Medicare summary notice or explanation of benefit, people looking to qualify for various low-income assistance programs, so we help answer all those types of questions. So if you get your Medicare new book, usually end of September, early October, you flip that book over, and there's a 1-800 number on the back. That'll get you to your local office, anywhere in the state of Michigan.
Every time I get that book in the mail, I always think I'm going to read it, and I don't think I ever have. Good thing we get a new one every year. So now I know that we have great educational partners. I know Teresa is not here today, but in terms of helping navigate the Medicare plan, but when it comes to things that fall under Medicaid, it's really important to understand the scope of what each program covers. So if you can kind of give us the very high-level view of Medicare versus Medicaid and the situations that would actually get paid under Medicaid.
Medicare, so this is a health insurance program for individuals over the age of 65, or those individuals who have been on Social Security disability for over 2 years. So Medicare, again, is health insurance, so the focus here is illness and injury. Looking to treat, get you better, and on your way. Medicaid, so the fun thing about Medicaid is we have over 30 different Medicaid programs here in the state of Michigan. So tons of different Medicaid programs. They all serve different purposes, they all serve different groups, for example, in the dual eligible, so both Medicare and Medicaid, Medicaid acts essentially as a secondary insurance. That's going to be one area of focus. So we have two different main categories for Medicaid for older adults. One is a community Medicaid program, and the other is long-term care Medicaid. So your community Medicaid, this is going to be essentially a secondary health insurance. So Medicare is going to pay first, and any of your deductibles and co-pays that are remaining would then go and be paid for by Medicaid. The problem here is that they're similar to any other Medicaid programs. There are income and asset qualifiers for you to qualify for this program. The problem is once people become Medicare eligible, the Medicaid income limit drops down to 100% federal poverty level. So for a single person right now, they would have to have an income gross amount per month of $1,235 or less to qualify for Medicaid as a secondary insurance. So you have to be very low income to qualify for this program. So that's your community Medicaid. Your long-term care Medicaid, so we have three categories or three programs here. Probably the highest level, this is going to be your nursing home Medicaid. So when you go into a nursing facility, into one of the qualifying beds there, Medicaid could step in and pay that cost for you. The next level, kind of the next level down would be PACE. So PACE here in Kent County, we have care resources. So PACE is a program where their focus is providing some services in the home, but they also have a day center or a facility that the beneficiary can go to. They have day services there. They also have all their medical services at this PACE facility. And that Medicaid would pay for those care services and all those medical services at this facility. And then the third long-term care Medicaid program is waiver, My Choice Medicaid waiver. So the focus of waiver is to pay for services in your home. For this program, there are income and asset qualifiers to qualify, but the main purpose is you might qualify to go to a nursing facility. So you might reach a nursing home level of care. So you have certain care needs that need to be taken for. Where you might not want to go to a nursing facility, you want to be able to remain in the community. Well, this waiver program, the purpose of that program is to provide those services that you might need so you can stay in your own home, and you don't need to go to a nursing facility. The state of Michigan would rather pay $2,000 or $3,000 for these in-home services compared to $10,000 per month at a nursing facility. So that's the main purpose of that program. In addition to that program, you'd also have a full Medicaid health benefit. So again, Medicare would be your primary health insurance, and Medicaid would step as a secondary.
Great. Yeah, that's a very good point of how they can help you stay home as well as, hopefully avoid the full-time nursing care at an actual facility. So one of the things that, obviously we've talked a lot about the cost realities that come with aging and the different living options, but I just want to address the fact that sometimes I hear that people think that assisted living is actually covered by Medicaid. And can you just kind of clarify that of when Medicaid would specifically pay for a person's full-time care, which you kind of answered some of that, but just the difference of, I guess, the level of assistance that you would need to qualify for full-time nursing care versus people who are living in assisted living just because they need some help with some ADLs.
The thing with assisted living, so this is always a funny question to answer. So Medicaid, outright, there's no Medicaid program that's going to cover assisted living. We just don't have this program. So the workaround is with the waiver program. So again, as I mentioned, waiver will help provide coverage for care services. It'll cover some services put in place in the home. Well, when you go to assisted living, there are some of those services that are put in place within the facility. So the waiver does have the capability to pay for some of those services. So what some of these assisted living facilities are able to do then is say, all right, we'll utilize the waiver program to pay for these in-facility services, in the assisted living. However, that's not going to be able to cover the full cost for the monthly cost for the assisted living facility. So it ends up turning into a situation where the facility is going to take those funds, they're going to end up taking the rest of your monthly income minus the $60, $65 that you can use for personal care services, and they're able to call that good. They could take a loss on that, I'm not 100% sure. So there is a way to utilize that Medicaid waiver in the assisted living setting. Now, not all assisted livings participate this way, so if you want to use that waiver to help pay for assisted living, one, you have to make sure that you find an assisted living that partners with one of the waiver agents. So here in Kent County, for example, we have 2 waiver agents. So 2 of these agencies that provide this program, Area Agency on Aging is one, Reliance Community Care Partners is the second. So you have to find a facility that partners with one of those 2 agencies for those waiver services. And then the other problem is too, maybe that facility, that assisted living does take a waiver, they might only allow maybe 2 of the spots there for waiver. So maybe they have 2 people already there in the waiver program, so they might not have any openings. So now you have to start looking around.
That is very, very helpful, because that really kind of builds on everything that Charles was talking about with that idea of, yes, you can live in not necessarily an independent situation in the scenario you were talking about, but in an assisted living, and yet still augment what would be normally provided by the assisted living with additional additional care services to keep you there longer so that you don't have to graduate to that higher and very much more expensive level of care on a monthly basis. So that really answered our next question too, but can you talk about the best options for those of us who are married and ends up with one spouse requiring care that could qualify for Medicaid, and how the other one could still remain in the family home?
Yeah, so Medicaid has some unique rules set up for married couples looking for long-term care Medicaid programs. So they have it broken up where the beneficiary needing the services, so we'll say the spouse going into the facility, their asset amount, we'll start with asset. So with the asset, you know, how much you have in the bank, savings, retirement accounts, all this kind of stuff. They are limited to $2,000 for asset. That's it. The other spouse in the community, there's a protected range for their assets. So essentially what happens with the state of Michigan is, I get a married couple that comes to the state, they say, hey, you know, we want nursing home Medicaid. First thing they do is they gather up and want to know all their assets. So you gotta tell me what all your assets are. You have to provide verification documentation, so you need proof for all these different accounts, things of that nature. You get that turned in. And the first thing the state does is they look at it, and if it falls below, the rate right now is about $30,000. If it falls below $30,000, the spouse in the facility can keep $2,000 of that. The community spouse gets to keep the $28,000 that's left over. They're allowed to keep all of that. Any dollar amount above that, what happens is they end up splitting the asset in half. The facility spouse gets to keep $2,000, and then the community spouse gets to keep the other half. And that half range goes all the way up to, currently this year, $154,000. So essentially, if you have about $300,000 of asset, you'll end up having to spend about half of that down for the spouse in the facility to have Medicaid turned on. But the community spouse gets to keep their half of the asset. One thing with assets for Medicaid purposes, the primary home that you live in is not a countable asset. One automobile is not a countable asset. So that's nice because the state of Michigan recognizes, especially for a married couple, that, hey, we still have one other person who's living out in the community, and we don't need to put them in a position where they're qualifying for other state assistance programs. So they want to allow that person to keep some assets in place. So looking on the income side, the community spouse gets to keep all their income. And the spouse going into the facility, depending on, so there's a whole funny mathematical formula where the state of Michigan will take their income, well, take both incomes, take some other factors, housing expenses, things of that nature, run it through the formula where some of the spouse going into the facility, they might be able to take some of their money, their income, and give it to the community spouse. So they can continue to pay ongoing expenses, bills, taxes, things of that nature. For an individual, a single individual, your income is all going to go to the nursing facility when you go to the nursing home, minus the $65 for personal care you can want. So, yeah.
And then just, this wasn't on the questions, but just some of the other things you mentioned, that you can still have a house, you can still, have a vehicle. So if someone wants to go out and buy their really nice convertible, knowing that their spouse is gonna need that care, can you get away with that?
The convertible? Yes, you can get away with that. So the big thing with Medicaid is divestment, giving away of assets. So Medicaid, they have in their Medicaid policy book, they have a whole chapter on this where you cannot give away money, you can't give away gifts, you cannot sell items for less than fair market value. So if I want to sell, my second car to my grandchild for $5, no, they're going to want to know that Blue Book cost for that automobile. If you give assets away, state of Michigan, they're going to They make the decision on this. So if they identify that you might have given away assets, depending on the dollar amount of given away, there is a penalty that we put in place down the road. So the main thing is for spending down of assets, you're going to, home repairs, paying for services, paying off debts, water heater. I've seen people put in new roofs, new driveways, things of that nature. But giving away.
And there is a 5-year look back. Is that correct?
Yep. They have to plan on giving stuff away. It's just that in the next 5 years, if you do that, the state of Michigan can look back and see, well, you gave away this dollar amount. Once you qualify for Medicaid, then we'll put the penalty in place. Medicaid won't pay anything until you've reached a certain time period at that point.
So just with the complicated rules of that, all the more reason to be working with professionals like Sherry and Curtis to simply look way ahead of things that may not be on your radar if you're really not, going to be using those things for 10 or more years, but now is the time to really start thinking about that. So we are almost at our time limit, so we've got time for just, first, if you can give these guys a round of applause. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open it up to questions. We've got time for just a couple, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the drawings.
I have a hypothetical question about Medicaid. Dealing with my parents years ago, if they're fully on Medicaid in the nursing home, full care, suddenly you have to go to the hospital for an illness of some sort, say heart trouble. How long will that empty bed be paid for by Medicaid because they don't like empty beds?
Ooh, I
Is there a
can't
time
remember.
limit, or is there
I believe there's a certain day period.
a day period?
Yeah, like 10 days, 15 days, something like that. It's been forever since I had that question. That's a good one.
Okay, I was just, thank you.
Yeah.
Question for Bob again. What if my assets are in a trust fund?
Trusts are tricky. I don't talk about trusts. State of Michigan, they have a whole set of lawyers that review trusts to find out if those trusts are going to be countable or non-countable asset. So I don't spend the time learning that because they're so complicated that we recommend people go talk to a elder law attorney for those questions.
Thank you.
I also have a question for Bob.
All right.
When you're spending down, can you prepay your funeral?
Yes. Yep. Prepaid funeral expense. It's like $14,000 is the max. So yep. When you do that though, the easiest way is to work with a funeral home because they know all the ins and outs of Medicaid for this purpose. Because you're going to want to make it an irrevocable funeral contract. So that means once that money's in there, you can't do anything with it. It is fully intended for paying for those funeral expenses, and that then is a non-countable asset.
Could one of you please address your thoughts on long-term care insurance? I've heard negative and positive regarding that, and I would appreciate maybe if one of you could give a comment.
I'll jump on that. So long-term care insurance, with a lot of the clients that we deal with, people who are trying to stay at home or if they're in assisted living communities and they need additional support, is a tremendous benefit. The cost of which can be high, but we have some people who are receiving 24/7 care in their homes thanks to their long-term care insurance. So I work with an insurance professional and make sure that you're reviewing your coverage, but from my experience, it is absolutely worth it.
I'd like to add just a little bit, because there's more solutions today in the long-term care insurance world, let's call it, where there's the traditional long-term care policies that have now gone into more of a life insurance with death benefit for long-term care, and there's different annuity solutions with riders for long-term care. So sometimes we want to look at more than just that traditional policy that you might be aware of, and it tends to get real expensive, and sometimes it's a use it or lose it, right? If you're paying in, and you never need it, then of course all those monies have gone to waste. Sometimes you can get return of premium. However, if you use a life insurance combination, at least the beneficiary is getting back those monies that were never used for long-term care. And in the annuity situation, you still have control of that asset. And if it doesn't get used for long-term care, that is still, of course, that asset that you have. So each one will come with its different characteristics and different premiums and what have you, but there are more solutions today, so I would definitely investigate.
And I'm actually just going to reinforce what Sherry's saying too, and also tied into the trust question. So we do trusts and we do estate plans. And I have a certification in long-term care that was actually put on by an attorney, and to cover all the aspects of insurance to trusts. And the biggest, I think, summary, because Sherry's exactly right, and you're exactly right as well, is the trusts are kind of, think of them as a loophole. Like Bob said, they evaluate whether they're going to count or not count a trust all the time, and then laws change and the trust you might have got might not work anymore. Right? So long-term care insurance, and like Sherry's saying, all these new solutions available, that's the real proper way to do it. There's no loophole, there's no something that's going to change now, you can't use it. And Sherry mentioned some very good ways, and honestly, a lot of people aren't using traditional coverage anymore. It's the new ways that Sherry's talking about. So that is an important thing to know, that insurance usually can get you everything that you wish and desire. A trust might.
Please, on your yellow sheets that you will turn in, feel free to say who you need more information from. We will absolutely reach out to you, because the key to all of this is that there is so much information, and your personal situation is probably going to warrant talking to, several experts in different areas, and often having even those experts collaborate on your behalf for the best overall outcome, which is really challenging. So